You probably believe that you can identify a musical instrument by sound, right? You can tell the difference between a piano and a guitar and a banjo and so forth. And sure, you can. But we're going to do a little bit of an unusual experiment here to see how good your discrimination skills actually are. So get yourself a piece of paper or the digital equivalent and be ready to write down your answers. We're going to listen to 12 different instruments and you're going to need to identify them. Now I'm going to tell you what the 12 instruments are. In fact, to make your life even easier, I'm going to play the audio of the instruments for you. So let's go through them. First of all, an acoustic guitar. An upright acoustic bass. A banjo. An upright piano. A clarinet. A violin played pizzicato, which means the string is plucked instead of bowed. A melodica. A side-blown flute. A mandolin. A whistle. A sitar. And lastly, a saxophone. Okay, now we're going to play them again in a shuffled order, and you need to write down your guess for each instrument. But here's the twist. For each instrument, we're going to chop off the beginning of the tone. That is, the attack of the instrument, the first little bit of the sound. You're only going to hear the sustained tone of the instrument. Furthermore, some of these instruments have a very fast decay, meaning the sound goes away quickly. Some of the plucked strings, for example, fade quickly, whereas the sustained instruments, like a clarinet or a melodica, do not. So I'm going to simulate a similar decay as well. The instruments that sustain will have their sustain faded out in the same way as the strings. So now you really have to identify these instruments just by the timbre. So here we go. Get ready to write your answers down. I'm only going to play each one a single time, so if you want to hear it more than once to make your guess, just use your arrow keys and go back. If you're like me, this is harder than you expect. The first research I'm aware of was from Charles A. Elliott of the University of Kansas. You can see the link in the description below for the paper. He found that most people have a pretty difficult time with a lot of instruments identifying which is which. There are other psychoacoustic effects that depend on the attack of the sound as well. We talked about the Franson effect in part 4 of the psychoacoustic series, where our stereo localization can get confused based on the attack. And the release of the sound also matters. For example, the way the hammers on a piano come on the string to silence the note, or your fingers come off of the frets of a guitar. That wasn't applicable in this test because I was just using sustained notes, but it's the same idea. So if you're not satisfied with your guesses, now's your last chance to go back and try again. Otherwise, I'm going to tell you the answers now. Okay, here they are on screen. Now let's go and look a little closer at some groups of these instruments. The piano, the banjo, the sitar, and the mandolin have what to me are pretty shockingly similar timbres. Here's the piano. Here's the banjo. Here's the sitar. And here's the mandolin. Especially the piano and the sitar surprise me. I do not think of these two instruments as being similar at all, and yet their timbres are really pretty similar when you hear them back to back. Now, the attack in the sitar is important. There's a lot of evolution of the harmonics in that first short period of time, but nonetheless, the sustain is shockingly close to a piano. If we look at the flute and the whistle, it's not really much of a surprise that these sound similar. It's very similar physics to how the sound is being produced. But I didn't realize that they were almost indistinguishable. I play a little side-blown flute and a lot of whistle, and I don't think of those instruments as sounding the same. I'd even go so far as to say that the difference between different makes of whistle and the differences between different makes of flute are more important in terms of the timbre than the differences between the instrument, the whistle, and the instrument, the flute. The bass and the violin shouldn't come as much of a surprise that they sound similar to each other. They are in the same family of instruments and made in a similar way. Still, a tiny little violin and a big giant bass like that being able to sound so similar is pretty impressive. The sax, the melodica, and the clarinet are kind of another obvious family of timbres here. I think the clarinet has one of the most identifiable timbres of any instrument. Really a pretty amazing instrument in general. The sax and the clarinet both have conical bores to their windways, which has to do with how their harmonic structure works, so I'm not sure why they sound so different from each other, but I personally don't have any trouble identifying the clarinet by timbre. The melodica, of course, quite a bright tone in comparison. In the original research, they found that clarinet, oboe, and trumpet were the three instruments that were most easily identified by their timbre. And for some reason, the cello people had a really hard time with. Okay, that's it for this demonstration. I hope that was interesting. I have a new instrumental album coming out soon. You can hear that music on my second channel, and I'm going to talk about the tunes in more depth here on this channel soon. Patreon link down in the description if you'd like to join up. Thank you so much, Patreons, and thanks to you for watching.